Hi, my name is Mark Burjack.
I'm Rachel Ely. Today we're going to be talking about coastal erosion in Louisiana. What are some of its main effects and why y'all should care?
The swamps and marshes of coastal Louisiana are among the nation's most fragile and valuable wetlands, vital not only to recreational and agricultural interests, but also the state's more than $1 billion per year seafood industry. The staggering annual losses of wetlands in Louisiana are caused by human activity as well as natural processes. U.S. Geological Survey scientists are conducting important studies that are helping planners to understand the life cycle of wetlands by detailing the geologic processes that shape them and by providing geologic input to models for mitigation strategies. Today, we'd like to share with you the history of the coastal erosion, the arising problems within the situation, and what is being done to save Louisiana in the future. Approximately 1/2 of our country's original wetland habitats have been lost over the past 200 years. This is partially due to natural evolutionary processes, but human activities such as dredging wetlands for canals or draining and filling for agriculture and development share a significant part of the responsibility for marsh habitat alteration and depletion. Louisiana's wetlands today represent about 40% of the wetlands of the continental U.S., but close to 80% of the losses. The state's wetlands extend as much as 130 kilometers inland and along the coast for about 300 kilometers. Not all the wetlands are receding, but at the present net rate of loss, Louisiana will have lost this crucial habitat in about 200 years.
Today in Louisiana, coastal wetlands are lost at an alarming rate of about a football field's area every hour. This equates to about 16 square miles every year. The biggest problem with Louisiana's coastline receding is the higher risk of flooding and consequently the threat of damage to coastal infrastructure. Specifically, Louisiana is no stranger to devastating hurricanes. These coastal storms will only increase in strength in the future as these marshlands that once helped buffer hurricane winds and storm surges disappear. From 1946 to 1981, Louisiana experienced its highest rate of petroleum production, and it was during this time that Louisiana's coastal wetlands were found to have sunken down by an alarming amount. With Louisiana's land slowly but prominently settling due to natural oil and gas reservoirs being drilled and excavated, this allowed for Gulf waters to creep into the marshlands and replace earth with water. In addition, during this oil boom, companies were not worried about coastal subsidence, so this invasion of saltwater into wetlands continued for decades without much intervention or concern. The saline content of the Gulf of Mexico has now permanently infiltrated Louisiana's coastal freshwaters. Today, marshes are overwhelmed by a brackish mixture of water that is beneficial for fishermen, but damaging to the plants, trees, and grasses that make up Louisiana's wetlands. From 1930 to 1990, as much as 16% of the wetlands were turned to open water as canals were dredged. Louisiana estimates that roughly 10,000 miles of canals were dredged during this time. Louisiana estimates that roughly 10,000 miles of canals were dredged to service them from 1930 to 1990. As much as 16% of wetlands were turned to open water. For decades, oil and gas companies blatantly disregarded the environment by doing this. Federal permits were not even required until 1972.
The Mississippi River Delta Plain and its associated wetlands and barrier shorelines are the product of the continuous accumulation of sediments deposited by the river during the past 7,000 years. Regular shifts in the river's course have resulted in 4 ancestral and 2 active delta lobes. As each delta lobe was abandoned by the river, its main source of sediment, the deltas experienced erosion and degradation due to compaction of loose sediment, rise in sea level, and catastrophic storms. Coastal processes eroded and reworked the seaward margin of the deltas, forming sandy headlands and barrier beaches. As erosion and degradation continued, low-relief barrier islands formed and eventually were separated from the mainland by shallow bays and lagoons.
Letting the Mississippi River freely change its flow helps deltas grow as much as they can and then flourish once the river changes its course. Once levees were put up to restrict the river's natural movement, the existing delta began suffering immensely.
And natural processes alone are not responsible for the degradation of wetlands in the delta plain. The seasonal flooding that used to provide sediments critical to the healthy growth of wetlands has been practically eliminated by construction of levees that channel the river for nearly 2,000 kilometers. Sediment carried by the river is now discharged far from the coast, depriving wetlands of vital sediment. In addition, throughout the wetlands, an extensive system of flood control structures, constructed to facilitate hydrocarbon exploration and boat traffic, has enabled salt water from the Gulf of Mexico to intrude in the freshwater wetlands.
Much of Louisiana's heritage was born in these coastal areas, and all that is left of the people that once lived there are ramshackle houses standing out in open water. Businesses and homeowners may respond by constructing structures such as levees or elevated buildings. The ultimate response to coastal land loss is abandonment. In addition to lost protection against coastal storms and the potential abandonment of this property, the depletion of Louisiana's coast means the depletion of a rich and celebrated culture. Locals are trying to deal with the shock of losing places they have known all their lives. With the severity of this problem, Louisiana is actively trying to implement solutions to help restore the coast as well as preserve the wetlands still in place. So how are you, as a civil engineer, mitigating coastal land loss in southern Louisiana?
So the company I work for is a geotechnical company, and we assist companies with designing coastal restoration projects. Some of the projects we do are marsh creation projects, some dredging projects, some flood protection projects, shoreline protection projects, and what we try to do is estimate how much, it's all very soft soil, how much things are going to settle. So if you pile a bunch of rock for shoreline protection, you may put 6 feet of rock, but it may settle down so only 3 feet of rock is above the water, and we try to predict that for folks.
All right. In 2012, Louisiana released the Comprehensive Master Plan for a Sustainable Coast. Focused on reducing the risk of flooding from hurricane surge and waves, the plan strives to reestablish some of the natural processes that will help restore the state's coast. Fundraisers and government funding together could be enough to one day implement all aspects of the master plan. All things considered, coastal erosion has slowly drained Louisiana, but if the community comes together in an honest effort to restore a culture, an ecosystem, a way of life, Louisiana can one day hope to see wetlands restored.
All right, bye guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new.